Good morning, everybody. It looks like we have some more people that are coming in, which is wonderful. So wonderful. We're getting a very nice turnout for the event. My name is Alec Goldstein. I'm the founder of Kodesh Press, which is proud to have co-published this book with Rabbi Bezalel Naor called Navigating Worlds, co-published by Kodesh Press and Orot, Rabbi Bezalel Naor's publishing house. We are here to discuss the Rav Kook on the sacred and the profane Zion in Jerusalem in perspectives, the culture wars, which was actually a topic we decided on before the events that have transpired the past couple of weeks, but hopefully we can use the messages of Rabbi Naor and Rav Kook to bring a greater level of Havana, of understanding, and of shalom, of peace to the Jewish community and the world at large. A little bit about Navigating Worlds, the new book. It's available in hardcover and paperback. I only have the paperback book here, but I know Rabbi Naor has the hardcover as well. It's a beautiful volume, beautiful cover, exquisitely typeset, and most importantly, the content is tremendous as well. The Jewish Press recently reviewed the book and wrote this mesmerizing review. This latest edition is a collection of life-breathing, entrancing words, plumbing biblical, midrashic, Talmudic, theological, philosophical, Maimonidean, Kabbalistic, Hasidic, Cookian, Messianic insight. There is no doubt that this book is autobiographical, not of just one individual, the singular Bezalel Naor, but of all of us who are navigating worlds. All of us homo mysticus, drawn to the mysterium tremendum, who are torn between the new and the old, the word and the world, the particular and the universal, and yet find in moments of equanimity the harmony of all of the above. Beautiful review of this book. I also want to mention that this is the third book that Kodesh Press has been privileged to publish from Rabbi Bezalel Naor. So in addition to Navigating Worlds, wonderful, we have a few more people that are joining us. So in addition to Navigating Worlds, we've also published When God Becomes History, the historical essays of Rav Kook, and the Legends of Rabbi Bar Hana, which is Rav Kook's commentary on the Agudah of Rabbi Bar Hana. Was it 15 or 16 stories that appear in the Gemara and Baba Basra? So I want to thank everybody for coming out on this Erev Yom Yerushalayim, or is it already Yom Yerushalayim in Yerushalayim? I'm not sure. Either way, it's a pleasure to have everybody here. I'm just going to admit a few more people. And with that, it is my great privilege and distinct honor to turn the digital floor over to the illustrious Rabbi Bezalel Naor.
We have an expression, potchim b'chvod achsanyan. So I want to express my gratitude to Rabbi Alec Goldstein and his wife, Carolyn, and the rest of their family. I first met Alec many years ago. I think we were sitting on an island in the middle of Amsterdam Avenue, and I was wearing a straw hat. It was a warm day, and that was the beginning of a beautiful partnership. And Alec is a Talmid Chacham who is very idealistic. He would have to be to take upon himself this enterprise of Kodesh Press. And as the name indicates, it's all about Kodesh. He's trying to get out a Torah which is honest and holy at the same time. And that's a challenge. So Baruch Hashem that we met that day, and I hope we go on to create many more wonderful Svarim together. We're here to celebrate Yom Yerushalayim, and for those of us who are not quite clear what the significance of Yom Yerushalayim is all about, it goes back to June of 1967, cachet Iyar. It was the reunification of Jerusalem. Between 1948 and 1967, Jerusalem was a divided city. Like Berlin, it was divided between East and West. And Jews did not have access to most of what is referred to as East Jerusalem. There were two notable exceptions. One was Mount Scopus, which had on it the original campus of Hebrew University and Hadassah Hospital. And on rare occasions, Jews might make it up there. And the other outlier was Mount Zion, which contains the apocryphal tomb of King David. And there too, rarely Jews might make it to Mount Zion, but the rest was cut off from the Jewish people. There was a woman by the name of Ruth Bloy, who was became the wife of Amram Bloy of the Neturei Karta. And as a French tourist to Jordan, she snuck into the Kotel, into the Western Wall. But for the masses of Klal Yisrael, the Kotel was inaccessible, inadmissible. In 48, the Rov HaYehudi, the Jewish quarter, was overrun by the Jordanians. It went up in smoke, and the synagogues were destroyed. Any vestiges of Judaism in the old city were systematically eradicated. And that was the state for a generation, from 48 to 67. And then came what we call Milchemet Sheshet Hayamim, the Six-Day War, in June of 67. And Yerushalayim was once again a united city, Ke'ir Shechubra La Yachdav. And that's what we're celebrating. At the time, I was 14 years old. I think Rabbi Weinberg would also have been that age. We were freshmen in MTA. I remember the events leading up to the Six-Day War. I was sitting in Gottesman Library. There was a Lubavitcher Chassid. His name was Michael. I don't recall his last name. And he was playing on the radio a message from the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory, reassuring the Jewish people that it will be okay. Things were looking not good. I understand that Rabbi Shlomo Goren, who was a chaplain of the IDF, of Tzahal, the army at that time, had been instructed to find a suitable place to locate thousands of graves. That's what was being anticipated, that there would be thousands of Jews slaughtered. And Israel was attacked from Egypt, from Syria, from Jordan. It started with the Straits of Tiran. Anyway, I can't give you too much history, but since this is all about Rav Kook, in Eretz Yisrael, at Yeshivat Merkaz Harav and Yom Ha'atzmaut, Hey Iyar, the 5th of Iyar, tonight is the 28th of Iyar. So it was a few weeks before, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kohen Kook, who was the Rosh Yeshiva Merkaz Harav, he was the Ben Yochid, he was the only son of his father, Avram Yitzchak Kohen Kook, got up And what he said flabbergasted people. He started yelling, "Efo Hebron shelanu, Efo Shechem shelanu, Efo Eratika." Where are all these places? Have we forgotten them? We forgot all of these places, Shechem and Hebron and the old city of Yerushalayim. And people really didn't know what he was talking about. We now know that he had received some kind of communication from his deceased father. His father passed away in 1935. And the night before, Rav Tzviuda had a dream in which his father came to him. And what he was vocalizing at that Yom Ha'atzmaut gathering in Merkaz Harav was what his father had transmitted to him b'chalom, in a dream. And a few weeks later, the students of Rav Tzviuda, Kohen Kook, found themselves in all of these places. And then the Gloi Milsa L'Mafreya, they remembered the words of their beloved Rabbi when they found themselves standing at the Kotel and standing in Hebron and Shem. Quite prophetic. So, we Jews, Hanach Lahem L'Yisrael, B'nei Nevi'im Heim. We had some great leaders, as I said, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I don't know what he was dreaming, but I remember distinctly as a boy listening to him on the radio in Yiddish. And Rav Tzviuda was speaking in Hebrew to his students, Merkaz Harav. These people had some indication that something very great for the Jewish people will take place. Just need a little water to refresh. I'm going to share one more personal experience. I was walking home from Yeshiva University late one night. I was on St. Nicholas Avenue. My grandfather, Alav Shalom, had gifted me a transistor radio as a bar mitzvah present. It was a great bar mitzvah present in those days. And I'm walking down the street. I'm attuned to the latest news from Eretz Yisrael. And I was probably in some kind of ecstasy or euphoria, not aware of my surroundings. The next thing I knew, I was surrounded by a group, I would call it a gang, of young men, hostiles, not friendlies. And their question to me was like, why are you Jews so happy now? Something to that effect. I don't recall exactly my response. Believe me, I didn't give them a shiur about Zion and Yerushalayim. That was not the response. But I thought fast and evidently had a glib tongue and somehow defuse the situation, because I'm here to tell you about it today. I walked out of there alive and unbruised. But at that moment, I was 14, it dawned on me that the Umot HaOlam are not going to allow the Jewish people to celebrate this victory. And look, I don't have to tell you everything that goes on planet Earth to this day. We are challenged. The nations of the world are not thrilled with Yom Yerushalayim. And what I want to share with you is something I recently discovered in my new hero, Seforno. Remember, Alec, out on the street in Teaneck, you and I were discussing Rabbeinu Ovadia Seforno, great Italian Bible commentator from 1475 to 1550, mostly in Bologna. And in his introduction to his commentary on the Torah, he goes through the Pentateuch book by book. And at the conclusion of Sefer Breshit, he says, "V'ra'a b'tov ba'acharav acharei ha'yeush." After Yeush, after giving up hope, he saw good. Then the conclusion of Sefer Shemot, "Uvazeh heshiv shchinato letocha achar tachlit hakilkul v'hayeush." The Shekhinah came back after Yeush, everyone had given up hope. Then the conclusion to Sefer Vayikra, "Ubesof ha'alot higi teshuat Yisrael acharei Yeush." After the curses, you have the salvation of Israel. Again, the key words, acharei hayeush, after giving up hope, after relinquishing hope. Sefer Bamidbar, v'sham natan seder lachalukat haaretz me'ever layarden v'hala, v'chol eila achar yeush avotem b'kilkulam b'meraglim, achar hayeush. So he preceded Reb Nachman of Breslov. You know, the famous saying of Reb Nachman Breslov, Yidin Zaitach nit miyayish, don't give up hope. That's the biggest sin for a Jew is yeush, to give up hope. So here we have an early Breslover Chassid living in Bologna, Italy. And that's the message that he sees in book after book of the Chumash, of the Torah. Achar hayeush, after we have already given up hope, to Shuat Yisrael, the salvation of Israel. So yes, we're challenged. A lot of people on this planet are not thrilled with the Jewish people and with Eretz Yisrael. And we continue, we forge ahead. So the reason that we're gathered here is to discuss the terms Zion versus Yerushalayim, that's Zion versus Jerusalem, two names for the same city. And many people have probed this and explored this. Our focus is going to be their significance for Rav Kook, that's Rav Kook Elder, Avram Yitzhak Cohen Kook, lived from 1865 to 1935. He was the first chief rabbi, Ashkenazic chief rabbi of Eretz Yisrael. And specifically, how those terms translate into Kabbalah, what the Kabbalistic tradition has to say about Zion versus Yerushalayim. Okay, so the story starts, I had intended to speak a lot about cachet Iyar before June of 67. Just very briefly, some things that might interest you. There's a prehistory of the 28th of Iyar. First of all, if you take a look in Shulchan Aruch, Orach Hayim, Siman Tav Kuf Pei, that's chapter 580, you will learn the Kafchet Bo Meit Shmuel Hanavi. This is the yard site of Shmuel Hanavi. Samuel the prophet passed away on the 28th of Iyar. That comes from the Tur, who gets it from the Bahag. It's a Gaoni tradition. It was appended to Megillat Tanit, but it really doesn't belong there. And I was thinking, what could be, again, from a mystical perspective, what could be the connection between Shmuel Hanavi and the recent modern events of the 28th of Iyar? Other than the fact that Nabi Samuel, that burial place of Shmuel Hanavi, also became accessible once again to the Jewish people on Kafchet Iyar. That's kind of obvious. You don't need a Kabbalist for that. But what I thought of is there's an interesting Yerushalmi in Megillah. Talmud Yerushalmi Masechet Megillah. Megillah shemasa Shmuel leDavid nitna lehidaresh. Ma ta'ama hakol b'chtav zo masoret miyad Hashem zu ruach hakodesh alai hizkil mikan shenitna lehidaresh. Okay, the proof text is Chronicles 1, chapter 28, verse 19. King David was not allowed to build the temple, only after his passing, his son, King Solomon, built the temple. This is the first temple. But King David transmitted to his son the layout of this future temple. And where did he get it from? This had been transmitted to him by Shmuel Hanavi. King Samuel, who anointed, the prophet Samuel, who anointed King David, transmitted to him a Megillah, a scroll. Now, this is not the temple scroll, the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's a different temple scroll. And it was all laid out in this scroll. If you take a look at the commentary, Korban Aida, Rabbi David Frankel, and Yerushalmi, he will tell you that this scroll went all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu, from Moses to Joshua, and it came down to Samuel, and Samuel Masar LeDavid. Megillah Shemasar Shmuel LeDavid. So that's the connection that I would make. That's the connection between the yahrzeit of Shmuel Hanavi, the 28th of Iyar, and these events of June 1967, where the Har Bayit, the Adenu, as was announced, Shmuel transmitted to King David the blueprint for the future temple. Another date in Jewish history, and this one is mefukpak. It's kind of fake news. If you take a look in Shem HaGedolim by Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai, lives in the 1700s in Italy. As I told Alec, I should have been an Italian Jew. That's probably where my spiritual roots lie. If you take a look in Shem HaGedolim, under the entry Rabbeinu Ovadia Mibar Tanura, he is analyzing a letter supposedly written by Rambam, but it's a fake letter. It's a bogus letter. And despite that, the Chida learns from it, Kama Hilchata Gabirvata. Many halachot can be learned from this letter. And at the end, he says, I think the letters are fake. But, and I showed this to my friend, Rabbi Moshe Maimon, who supposedly is descended from Maimon. He had never seen this. Of course, it's a fake. Why would he see it? And the Rambam supposedly writes, "V'kibalti la'asod yom mishteh v'simcha v'yomahu kol shana v'shana hu kafchet liyerach ziv." Ziv is the biblical name of this month of Iyar. And the Rambam is celebrating something. I'm not going into what he's celebrating. And every year he would make a Yom Mishteh v'Simcha. He would make a Yom Tov, a holiday, on this day, the 28th of Ziv, or what we call Iyar. Just briefly, the halachot that the Chida derived, that an individual can declare a Yom Tov. He quotes Tshuva of Maram Alashkar, that if a city wants to make a Purim, they not only can they must, chayvim, they're obligated to do that. There's a Pri Chadash who says, no, Batla Megillat Tanit, in Hag Ta'ud, you can't just make up new holidays. And the Chida says, Varei Avi HaTa'udah Rambam. Who's greater than Maimonides? Rambam made a Yom Tov for himself, for his family. And it's a whole halachic discussion. It goes on and on and on. Illustrious Sephardic sages Rabbi Chaim Abulafia in Mikra Kodesh, and others. And Chida says, "Chvar hichrati ken ani hadiot k'maram al ashka midivrei harambam." Now he refers to another letter of the Rambam. I am not able to evaluate whether this letter is also fake news, but this letter of the Rambam is quoted in Sefer Charedim, which is a pretty authoritative work, and it says that the Rambam kibel olav al zaro at sof hadorot yom tov b'yom sh'ala min hayam. It seems the Rambam was on a sea voyage. It was perilous. He was saved from disaster and made a Yom Tov for him and his descendants for posterity on that day that he was saved at sea. The reason I even mention it en passant is because you're probably aware that halachically it's very difficult to make up a new Yom Tov, whether it's Yom Ha'atzmaut or Yom Yerushalayim. The Rabbanut did that, and some of us accept that, and others do not. But it's a very controversial issue, and you might want to refer to the Chida, who is talking about the 28th Liyerach Ziv, the 28th of Iyar, of all dates. Okay, so let's now talk. Oh, one more thing, and this is probably the most important thing you have to know. Before June of '67, the Kook family celebrated every year as a Yom Tov the 28th of Iyar. Why? Because that was the day that they arrived in Eretz Yisrael in 1904. It was right before Shavuot. Rav Kook accepted the offer to become the Rav of Jaffa, and left his Rabbanis in Boysk, Latvia, which was a big city at that time. And he and his son Rav Tzviuda, the family, they left Latvia, and they voyaged to Yafo, and they arrived B'diuk exactly on the 28th of Iyar, and every year they would celebrate that day as a Yom Tov. Now I'm going to share with you something very spooky. This was told by a dear friend of mine, Rav Eliezer Waldman of Kiryat Arba. Let me grab a drink because it's spooky. Besides the Chayalim, the soldiers, two of the first people to arrive at the Kotel were Rav Tzviuda Kohen Kook, the Rosh Yeshiva of Merkaz Harav, and the Nazir. The Nazir, Rav David Kohen, was a very close Talmud of the Rav. He edited his writings, brought out this magnificent magnum opus, Orota Kodesh. And the way they arrived at the Kotel is an interesting story. The Nazir's son-in-law was Rav Shlomo Goren, and he was the chief rabbi of Tzahal. And as soon as the Kotel became accessible, he sent a jeep. He sent a driver with a jeep to pick up two men. One was Rav Tzviuda Kook, and the other was his father-in-law, Rav David Kohen. Rav David Kohen was a Nazir, long hair, no wine. He had all kinds of other chumrot he had taken upon himself. He hardly spoke. He was in a constant state of tanit dibur. A strict vegetarian, wore sneakers, and was a recluse, never left his home. Okay. I had the privilege of being in his home after his passing. He had a shul in his home. He had a private minyan in his living room, and that was it. He never went anywhere. This was before COVID-19, total lockdown isolation. So, but for this to go to the Kotel for the first time in a generation, he made an exception. So the two of them were put in the Jeep and transported to the Kotel by Rav Shlomo Goren. Rav Waldman tells a story that the next day, he and some other Talmidim of Merkaz Harav, they went to the home of Rav Tzviuda. I had the privilege of being in that home many times, Rav Ovadia Shloshim, and they didn't find Rav Tzviuda there, so they're trying to figure out where he went to. He also didn't get out much. So they figured there's one place he could be. He must be visiting his friend, the Nazir. Those two were very close. So they went to the house of the Nazir. This is Rehov Amos. And sure enough, they see these two elders sitting. And the Nazir spoke, which was wonderful. He didn't speak very much. And he's still on a roll from the events of yesterday. And he reveals to the Talmidim, he says, Ani raiti shem et harav. He says, I saw the Rav at the Kotel. So Waldman asks, is a Rav? So he says, Harav, from Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, who had passed away in 1935. So Waldman said, Harav? B'vadai. The Od Haya Lavush the Bigdei Shabbat. Well, of course, he was wearing Bigdei Shabbat. And that's the end of the testimony from Rav Waldman. These people, Rav Kook and Rav Chalap and the Nazir, they they had visions at the Kotel, and I can't go into that. It would make for a fascinating study, but you might want to connect the dots and say that the reason that the Rav was wearing Bigdei Shabbat was because every year on Kafchet Iyar, he would wear Bigdei Shabbat. That was his Yom Tov. That was the day that he arrived in Eretz Yisrael. So of course he was wearing Bigdei Shabbat. It's a Yom Tov. We have to discuss now the terms Zion and Jerusalem and what they mean for Rav Kook and what they mean in Kabbalistic tradition. But let's backtrack. Where does the term Zionism come from? So we would suppose it goes back to Theodor Herzl. I did some legwork, found out actually preceded Herzl. It goes back to Nathan Birnbaum. Nathan Birnbaum, in the early 90s, a few years before Herzl came out with it in the late 90s, coined the term Zionism. And then Herzl evidently was fond of it and adopted that. In World War I, Rav Kook is in London, and there were momentous events. It's called the Balfour Declaration. Lord James Balfour. The Neturei Karta referred to him as Balfour. Okay. That's another tradition. We won't go into it, but they have choice epithets for Herzl and Kook and Balfour. Balfour is Balfour. Rav Kook issues an open letter in Yiddish. This is in World War I in London. That's where Rav Kook was sojourning temporarily. He writes in Yiddish because that was his audience. They were Russian and Polish Jews who had immigrated to London. And he launches a movement that he calls Degel Yerushalayim, the banner of Jerusalem. And he says, you know, we have the Zionist movement based on the term Zion, Zionut, but now we need Yerushalmiut based on Yerushalayim, Degel Yerushalayim. And I will be your leader. Okay, so Nachum Sokolov and Chaim Weizmann are the leaders of the Zionist movement. I am the leader now of the Jerusalem movement. And the movement was short-lived. The two great accomplishments of the movement were, number one, setting up Rabbanut HaRashit, the chief rabbinate in Eretz Israel, upon Rav Kook's return to Israel, Eretz Israel, from England. This is in the early 20s. And the other great achievement was setting up Yeshiva Merkazit HaOlamit, the central universal yeshiva, very grandiose title for yeshiva. It became what's known as Merkaz Harav. It still exists today in Kiryat Moshe. And then the movement kind of petered out. There were rabbis from Switzerland and England and elsewhere that got involved, but it did not last very long. Now, Kabbalistic, I have to provide more explanation. So what does Zion symbolize and what does Yerushalayim symbolize? So said Rav Kook, Zionism is secularism. That's the secular aspect of the land, whole. And the Kodesh, like Kodesh Press, right? The Kodesh aspect is Yerushalayim. So you've got the sacred and the secular. Jerusalem is the sacred, the holy, the religious, whatever you want to call it. And Zion is the secular, the mundane aspect, the temporal aspect. Now, there's a Kabbalistic problem here. And that is that in Kabbalistic tradition, it should be quite the opposite. And there are so many sources to point to this, and time is running short, but from the Kabbalistic perspective, Zion would be the pnimiut, that would be the inward aspect. And Yerushalayim would be the chitzoniut. That's the external, the outer aspect. And sure enough, two men picked up on this. The first one to point this out, that Rav Kook had flipped the terms around, was his beloved Talmud, one might actually say Talmid Chaver, which is more than a Talmud. His name was Yaakov Moshe Chalav. And in a letter to Rav Kook, it's published in the collection Heid Harim, he says, I received your Yiddish pamphlet, Degel Yerushalayim. I want to translate it into Hebrew. And he says postscript, but Kabbalistically, we've got a problem here because you're saying that the Zionism is the political aspect and Yerushalayim is the sacred aspect. Kabbalistically, Zion is Yesod, it's Tzadik Yesod Olam, and Yerushalayim is Malchut. And we might speak more about these terms as we go on. The second one who pointed out to Rav Kook was a very curious figure living in London. His name was Shemariah Menashe Adler, who fought with the whole world. He fought with Diane Hillman, later with Diane Abramsky. He sat in jail for a while. He was a very cantankerous figure. He was a Gaon. He also knew a thing or two about Kabbalah, as we'll see. He loved Rav Kook, which was a dubious distinction. But he soon soured on Rav Kook. When Rav Kook was unwilling to join his battle, his jihad on Dayan Hillman, who was Rav Herzog's father-in-law. So then he dropped all of the honorific titles for Rav Kook. He's no longer gone, and it's Tzaddik, and he's just Rav Kook now. Anyway, I don't have Adler's letter. I'd love to have it, but it seems to have gone missing. But we have the other half of the correspondence. It's published in the 4th volume of Igrot Raya, where Rav Kook responds, and let me grab hold of this. Val devar Torato sha'ir she'tzion himida yoter pnimid miYerushalayim. You wrote that Zion, Kabbalistically, is more inward than Jerusalem. And here I think Rav Kook was a little miffed or insulted. He says, Zeu davar pashut, that's simple. V'chol matchil b'Kabbalah yodea. Any beginner, anybody who knows the alphabet of Kabbalah, don't think you're telling me great chidushim, okay? This is like Kabbalah 101. This is entry level. Any Bar Berav Dachad Yoma knows that Zion is Tzaddik Yesod Olam and Yerushalayim is Malchut. Now, Rav Kook wriggles out of it. And in order to do that, he comes up with a total bouleversement. It's topsy-turvy. And this is how the answer goes. Just try to wrap your minds around it. It's Rav Kook is a contortionist at this point. He says, okay, let's take the Sheshet Yemei Chol versus Shabbat. We have the 6 weekdays and we have Shabbat. Now, in the Sphiratic realm on high, so those 6 days of the week, Vak, Shesh Ksavot, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, and that's Achod Yesod, they're higher. And Shabbat, which is Malchut, is lower. But then when they come down to earth, things get reversed. So the 6 Sphirot, which are higher, they become Chol. They become the secular, temporal weekdays. And that which was lower upstairs, Shabbat Malchut, comes down here, and lo and behold, is Kodesh. It's sanctified. And why is that? Says Rav Kook, there's kind of like a, I don't know, like a sound barrier, something like that. Things have a hard time coming down into our earthly sphere. So that which is holier, the Shesh Sphirot, the Shesh Ksavot, come down here as Chol. Like they can't bring down their holiness, so they translate as Chol, as weekdays, as secular days. The Shabbat, which is lower upstairs, comes downstairs as Kodesh. It's able to transmit. It's able to break that barrier. Okay. So he says, by the same token, you're right. Upstairs, Zion is more Pnimi. It's the Yesod of Malchut. And Yerushalayim is more external. It's lower. It's the Malchut. But when they come down here, there's this kind of role reversal. So Zion comes down as secular. At the shoresh, at the root, it's higher. But down here, it's lower, it's secular. And that which is lower upstairs, at the shoresh, at the root, comes down here as Kodesh. Yerushalayim is Kodesh. Where is this coming from? The best I can do is to situate in Chabad, in Hasidut Chabad, and we know Rav Kook gets certain elements of his Kabbalistic perspective from Chabad. You get this in Chabad. There's a famous essay of Rav Kook. It's published in Orot from 1950 on. Neshamot Me'olam HaTohu, the souls of chaos, where Rav Kook says we have souls that are from the world of chaos, which is higher than the world of tikkun. And then they come down here and they're challenged. All kinds of challenges. What do they have? I don't know, drug addictions, whatever. You have to read the essay. It's one of his most famous essays. People in this generation love it because it gives us hope that those of us who are chaotic souls at the Shoresh are really higher, and the people who are Mesudarim B'Chayim, the people who are the success stories, they at the root, they're lower, they're from the Olam HaTikkun. Rav Tzvi Yehuda in the back of a road provides a source. The source is Torat Chaim of the Mittler Rebbe, Reb Dov Be'er Shnei Ori. He got it wrong. He says it's Rashaz. It's really the son of Rashaz, of Shnei Zalman. It's Reb Dov Be'er, which is a common error to make. So this idea comes out of Lubavitch, out of Reb Dov Be'er of Lubavitch, Torat Chaim, Harshat Vayishlach. He's talking about Yaakov and Esav, Jacob and Esau. So we know Jacob is the tzaddik and Esau is the rasha, right? But at the root, at the shoresh, the root of Esav is higher than the shoresh of Yaakov. So this is actually as shocking as it may seem to us. If you're coming out of Chabad, this is really stark. It's not a chidush at all. Another thing you'll find in Chabad is the shoresh.
Rabbi Naor, hey, sorry to interrupt. It is 10:50.
Okay.
So
right,
what I'd like to do is that maybe we can do 5 more minutes.
Okay.
Then we'll do a 10-minute Q&A and we'll do a hard stop at 11:05.
Okay.
I know people might have other. It's Mother's Day. It's Yom Yerushalayim. People might have other things. As you know, and I certainly don't want that to
okay.
interfere. Thank you.
So, look, if you want to get the full dose, I recommend this book by some unheard of author. It's called Navigating Worlds, and this is the hardcover version. It's in 2 volumes, and there's a whole essay, a sprawling essay called Zion in Jerusalem. And there you'll get the full complement and all kinds of wonderful Marei Mekomot. But this was Rav Kook. Rav Kook was a peacemaker. He was trying to make peace between what he called Zionism and Jerusalemism, between the secular and the sacred. This Kulturkampf continues to this day. Culture wars, I translated the German Kulturkampf into English as culture wars. And I will leave you with a Targum, an Aramaic translation. We all know, Hinei matov u'man na'im shevet achim gam yachad. This is Psalm 133, verse 1. How good and how pleasant is it when brothers dwell together? Right? We all know that song. Listen to the Targum, and I think Rav Kook would be very thrilled with this Targum. Kama tav uchama besim Lemitav Tzion Yerushalayim Kitrei Nachin Baram Kachada. That's the Aramaic. Let me attempt to translate to English. How good, how pleasant, how lovely for Zion and Yerushalayim, Zion and Jerusalem, to dwell Kitrei Nachin, like two brothers, Baram Kachada, but one. So they're not really two, the two brothers, Zion and Yerushalayim, they're really one. And so this is what we need to be doing. We need to be like Rav Kook and Rav Chalap and the Nazir and Rabbi Levine. We need to be peacemakers. We need to be bridge makers to bridge the gap between what Rav Kook referred to as Zionism and Jerusalemism. Okay, so I think you can now unmute questioners.
I just wanted to say thank you again, everybody, for coming. The book Navigating Worlds is available. Just to clarify, the paperback is 1 volume and the hardback is 2 volumes. We have to do that for printing concerns. They're all available at our website, kodeshpress.com. So please check it out. If you want to be added to our mailing list, certainly, just drop me a message. I'd be happy to add you. With that, I'm going to end the recording, and then we'll turn it over for Q&A if anybody has any questions. Yashka.